Hello everyone, Kristina Werner here. Welcome to another video for LIMELICIOUS.com. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to create 3 cards using the stamp set included in the January 2023. Yes, we are thinking about next year already. The January 2023 card kit. So this is the card kit stamp. This is the one that I designed for the kit. All brand new snowflakes. You all know I love a snowflake, and new greetings. So I'm going to be walking you through 3 cards that I thought of while I was designing the stamp set. So it really utilizes a lot of the images in the stamp set. So the 3 cards that I have planned are in my sketchbook right here. This one right here uses this border image right here. You can flip it around and have it on the bottom as well. Then I thought it'd be really fun to use the big heart image in the stamp set. And then on this 3rd card, I'm just going to use some of the snowflakes to create a really fun kind of cluster of snowflakes over on the side. Today's cards are all about ink blending. So I'm going to do ink blending on this one from the center going out. On this one, I'm going to do a center blending as well. And on this one, it's going to kind of go kind of from the bottom center of the card up through the side. It'll make more sense when we get going here, but the plan is to do all the ink blending and then do some stamping on top. And for these 2 cards in particular, I plan to use white embossing powder. So I need to make sure that I have enough color put down onto my card that the white is showing really well and that the images and especially the text are legible and easy to read. So that's why I have these cards sketched out with a little bit of planning. Planning does help you achieve a really great card, especially when these card designs are very, very clean and simple. Let's get going. Starting out with some grid paper here. This is from Simon Says Stamp. I'm choosing to ink blend on top of grid paper in particular, as opposed to something that might have a slick surface like a craft sheet or the replacement mat for the Tim Holtz glass media mat. I'm choosing paper instead because if any of the ink goes off the paper, I want it to dry and get trapped on the paper itself instead of transferring to the back of whatever I'm working on. I'm going to be blending directly onto my card bases today. So having the using paper as my backdrop while I do my blending just helps catch any of that ink that might transfer to the back. All right, for my first card, it's this one right here that has the 2 border pieces, so I need to have color coming from the center of the card. I've chosen 3 different colors of Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink. I've got Iris, Sweet, and Lemonade. As I'm ink blending, I'm pouncing off onto my grid paper so that the strongest amount of ink comes off the brush. That just helps me get a much softer blend once I bring it over to my card. I'm also bringing the colors over a little bit further than I actually want them to appear so that there's a chance for the next color over to blend from that area. Also bringing over the stamp set because I want to make sure that that area is going to be long enough to cover that whole spot. I need to get the yellow a little bit more intense on this side because I really want the white to show up on top. So this is my first ink blended card, nice and clean on the back. This card, just as a reminder, is this one that has a heart over the top. My plan is to stamp that heart and white heat emboss on vellum and then have the heart and the greeting on top of the ink blended card base. And the colors I've chosen for this one, I've just got 2. I'm going to be using AEGEAN, which is actually a full-size ink pad that comes in the kit for January, and LIMELICIOUS, a nice and bright green. I think that's going to look really nice with that heart over the top. So there's the second card base blended. And the third card, as a reminder, is this one right here, where I'll have the grading kind of in the center bottom right of the card, and then I'll have the snowflakes up on the side and probably bleeding off the edge. So I want to have kind of like a cluster of color in that bottom corner and fading up off to the left-hand side of the card. The three colors I'm using for my third card are Royal, Tropic, and Sunbeam. So now I need all of these ink blended backgrounds to dry completely before I start doing my heat embossing. So I'm going to let these sit for a little bit of time, and then I'll come back and test them before I get to stamping. While those dry, I can do a little bit of that stamping on vellum. So I'm going to put some vellum from Simus's stamp into my Misty, and I'm going to be stamping the heart stamp. I'll first put the stamp on the door of my Misty, and then I'm going to come back and do an anti-static powder tool just so that I get the best stamped image possible. Using Versamark ink. And I'm using Alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. This is a really great white embossing powder. And I'll just heat set this until everything is melted. The plan is to have the greeting across the front, and so I can adhere everything to the card from the area behind the greeting. This vellum's a little bit flimsy right now, so I'm going to double it up and adhere it to itself, so I have 2 layers of vellum. The best way to get 2 layers of vellum is to just use a liquid glue and glue everything down over the entire surface of the vellum, because then any glue lines won't show. Bringing that grid paper back, and what I'm going to do is just put liquid glue all on the back of this vellum, like all over it. Using some Gina K Designs Connect glue, and I'm just going to glob like a large amount of glue all over this. And then this is when we get to be a little messy, and you bring out your inner child from when you were in kindergarten and played with glue. Because I'm just going to run this glue over. I'm trying to make sure I don't move it. But I'm just squidging it all over. And I can bring the vellum piece, put that right over the top. And I'm just going to try to really glue that down, really get that to stick. And because there's no, like, start or stop or beginning or end to the glue itself, seeing the glue through the vellum is very minimal. Look at that. You can hardly see it at all. Just this glue is pretty much dry, so I'm going to cut around the edge of the heart, and I'm just going to leave a little bit of space around that edge. Meanwhile, while I'm doing all this, those backgrounds are drying. And this is definitely more solid and stiff now that I've got 2 layers of vellum plus the glue. All right, you see how much more solid that is just by doubling up on the vellum. So that's going to be going on this card. I think that's going to be so cute. Before we start adhering everything, we do need to stamp our grading. I'm using some Hero Arts Pitch Black cardstock. First have the stamp on the door of my Misty, and then once again I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool just over the top, and then stamp in Versamark ink. And I'm going to very gently press this down because it's a very delicate font, and I don't want to squish it and have the font kind of bloom out and thicken. Using that same embossing powder, the Alabaster from Brutus Monroe. I'm using a ruler and also a craft knife to trim this out. You could definitely use any of the sentiment strip dies or anything like that if you want. This is just a little easier for me since I've already got my knife out and I've also got my ruler. And then for the two ends, I just take my scissors and just do a couple simple cuts. And there we go. I'm going to put some foam adhesive behind the So Much Thanks. I'm using some foam strips from Waffle Flower. All these narrow little strips are just amazing. And then I'm actually peeling off 3 at a time so it's a little thicker. We'll just put that directly on there. And then I can remove the release papers as well. If you need foam tape that's just a little bit thicker than just one of the narrow strips, they're still stuck together enough that you can pull them all off together in one go. All right, I'm going to pretend I'm putting this on my card. Just put that right on top. It's a little bit of foam hanging out the ends, but that's not a problem at all because we're going to be adhering this directly to the front of the card. So now I can see where I can put my adhesive. You can glue that directly down. If you wanted to, you would also could just do that, smear all the glue on the back and it would go directly down. And make sure I'm getting the bottom of the card. There we go. And then I can put this right on. And because it's liquid glue, I have a little bit of time to wiggle this around and make sure everything is straight. That looks good. So there is the first card all finished. Now it's time to test out these other ink blended backgrounds to see if they're ready for heat embossing. So I'm going to use my anti-static powder tool first. And I'm just going to put a little bit of that anti-static powder down onto each one of these backgrounds. By the way, this is the Cottontail from Rabbit Hole Designs. It's a great powder tool. And I'm going to test each one of these to make sure that everything's dry by putting some heat embossing powder right over the top and checking to make sure that it slides off when I tap it. Okay, this one looks like it is not completely dry. It's going to brush off that powder with a clean paintbrush. That one is definitely not dry. I'm just anticipating that this one won't be either, but let's check just to be sure. I'll tap that. Nope, it is definitely not dry. So this is why we test it before we start stamping. I've heat set them or sped up the drying process with my heat tool. So let's try these one more time. Let's test them out. It's sliding off already. When I tap it, nearly all of it comes off. It's just these areas down right here that don't. So now I know I can just hit that with my heat tool one more time and it will probably get those areas. That one slides off right away. There's no more powder left on it. All right, let's test this one more time. Make sure everything slides off okay. Much better. So some of you might be asking, I'm just anticipating this being a question that would come up in the comments, why don't you just do your heat embossing first? Why not just stamp first and then do it? Well, I've noticed, especially when you're using white embossing powder, that sometimes the embossing powder can take on the color that you ink blend over the top. And I want my white areas to be completely bright white. So that's why I've chosen to do the inking first and the embossing powder after. The grading I've chosen to go in the middle of the border piece is Sending Snow Much Love. I'm going to stamp this first and then I can do my borders on top of it. I'm also going to use this grid transparency sheet to assist me in getting the words directly in the center of the card and also, centered vertically and horizontally. All right, we'll close the door of my MISTI. That'll transfer the stamp to the door and I can also peel off this grid. going to use my anti-static powder tool one more time, going across this, just to make sure I give my embossing the best chance possible. Using my Versamark ink, ink that up, and then stamp directly down onto my card base. I'm going to go ahead and put embossing powder on this one and heat set it first so that I can really see where the border is going. My heat tool is nice and hot, so this actually melted really, really quickly. I'll use that grid transparency sheet again one more time just to help me get this on perfectly straight. Okay, once you have that on there completely straight, go ahead and transfer that to the door. I'm going to do my anti-static powder again one more time, just because. And then I'll use my Versamark ink pad. I've left my stamp on the door of my Misty, so now in this one, since I've centered it with that grid paper, I can actually just turn it over this way. And I'm gonna kind of eyeball it. Is that really gonna be center? Looks like it. So I'm going to ink up my stamp once again and stamp down. I feel like I'm losing a lot of the pink in the center, and also I can't really see the words on the end very much. So I'm actually going to go against what I thought I was going to be doing, and I'm going to ink blend a little bit on top here. I was trying to avoid it, but it might be what I need. All right, so you can see how, I don't know if you guys can see, but it does kind of put the color a little bit on top of the embossing powder. It's really getting lost right there in the middle. I'm really concentrating the color right across the grading because that's where I want it to be the darkest. Now sometimes the ink will sit on top of the embossing powder and you are able to wipe it off. So we're going to try that in a minute, and maybe some of that color will come off. Just going to grab a dry paper towel, see if I can wipe some of that off. Okay, it does wipe some of it off. You can see it on my paper towel there, but not a whole lot comes off. Just enough that I think it cleans it up quite a bit. So there's the second card all finished. So now we know doing an undercoating of color works. Just make sure you get it really dark, but you can also blend over the top a little bit and the white will still be bright enough. Could go either way, just personal preference. For this last card, I think the stamps will be far enough apart that I should be able to stamp everything all in one go. So I'm peel off that grid transparency sheet and then ink up my stamps. Should have used my anti-static powder tool one more time. I hope I don't come to regret it. Putting on some of that alabaster embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. Everything's sliding off beautifully. Okay, so that looks pretty good to me. I think I do want to add some additional little snowflakes, kind of filling in the gaps, however. And then stamp these 5 little images and apply embossing powder. Oh yeah, I think that's gonna finish off the design really well. Okay, so here are all 3 cards finished using the January 2023 card kit. So I hope you guys enjoyed. You can pick up all of these supplies over at LIMELICIOUS.com. And thank you so much for watching today. I appreciate you tuning in, and I will see you guys in another video very soon.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.